Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Carefulist, the podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. We have an amazing conversation coming up with Lynn Abate Johnson. She is an international best-selling author and global community builder. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me today.
I am so glad you can join us because we have so many fantastic things to talk about. Um, but let's start at the very beginning, which is always the best place to start. Can you share your caregiving story with us?
Yeah, sure. I started caregiving when my mom was diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer in January. No, it was February of 2011, so about 14 years ago.
Mhm.
And um, this, big, scary diagnosis, right? And found out later that she had the BRCA2 gene. So that gene, just flipped on. And she was 74 years old, and she had started to, I just saw her declining. And my mom was the type of person that was very gregarious, very energetic. She was doing boot camp at 5:30 in the morning with my sister and I, and exercising with us. And yeah, sure, she cheated a little bit here and there because I wasn't going to be doing burpees or anything. But
Yeah.
she really started to slow down, Katie. And I know my mom, or I knew my
Mhm.
mom. I could tell that something was really off, especially when she started to have to take naps or lay down in the middle of the day. That was not
Mm.
her MO at all. My mom wouldn't take a nap if her life depended on it. And this time,
Yeah.
like, did depend on it. And so I insisted on finally. Oh, and she was swelling up. So if you look up the signs and symptoms of ovarian cancer, they actually call it the silent killer because there's so many other things that it could be.
Yeah.
But her belly was starting to get distended, and she was a very tiny person. She was very
Mhm.
petite. And then, her ankles and her feet and stuff started swelling up. Then she was really fatigued all the time. So after, a couple of weeks of that, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I found a doctor and
Mhm.
referred to this doctor. And the doctor I guess the doctor thought, oh, this is kind of classic ovarian symptoms. And so we did go in for either a CT or a PET scan. And then from there, that was it. We were referred to a gynecological oncologist surgeon.
Mhm.
Was a rock star. He was amazing. And within a week, she was having that big cancer surgery. And
Mm.
yeah, so that was the beginning of February 2011. And then we started up on this caregiving journey, which lasted way longer than statistically it should have. So it was over
Yeah.
6 years. And
That's really long for ovarian cancer.
yeah,
Wow.
she really beat the odds. She was generally in very, very good health, never smoked or drank or, had any extra weight on her or, ate really, really healthy whole foods and things.
Mhm.
Her so yeah, that that just kicked off that roller coaster. I call it that tsunami of emotions, for us as a
Yes.
family.
Yeah. So, um, 6 years is a long time to be in the caregiving space, emotionally, mentally, physically. There's a lot that goes into it. And my family went through a long journey as well as caregivers. Um, so I'm curious to know about, the ups and the downs. You mentioned it's a roller coaster. Why don't we start with the ups? What were the joys or humorous things that happened, if there were things or certain things that you did together where you shared joy or a laugh about something?
Sure, there were lots of funny moments and joyous moments, and I felt that it was really important to highlight those moments because, it's a big, serious, intense thing. And
Yeah.
so we started out not knowing anything about caregiving. And by the end, of my mom's life, uh, I felt confident enough to write a book about my experience. And the reason that I even did that was because so many people, I was writing in the journal on caringbridge.org. So if any of your
Yes.
listeners or viewers have a loved one that's struggling, going through some kind of a medical issue, highly recommend caringbridge.org. And they even have my book in their library. Can I show it?
Sure.
Out of Love, A Daughter's Journey with Her Mom to the End. And so I was writing in that journal every single day and sometimes many times a day. And so each of the chapters starts out with a journal entry. So so the journal entry starts out the chapter and then my perspective in the aftermath. So you know how hindsight is 2020. So that's how
Yes.
I wrote it. I put a journal entry of what I was saying to the friends and family members. And then that was from Caring Bridge. And then after my mom died and I started really writing the book in earnest, I thought,
Hmm.
I'm going to express my feelings in this part of it. So
Yeah.
before that, it was all very factual. And I would talk about funny things like, my mom losing her balance and almost falling off the toilet seat in the hospital. And just like really hilarious things and really funny, dry sense of humor type things that my mom would say. And so
Yes.
those were just kind of factual things that I was reporting to the family and friends near and far who
Yeah.
I knew they wanted to know the everyday gory details of everything my mom was going through. But then
Mhm.
in the book, I wanted it to be helpful and useful for people, not only emotionally to let other family caregivers know that they're not alone, but also the systems and structures that I created, like all of the checklists and the practical applications for that everyday grind of caregiving. And so
Yes.
um, that's so the book always has that each chapter is always that it's the Caring Bridge entry and then my perspective, and then it always has a quote. And then there's pictures of my mom and me sprinkled throughout the book. So I mean, I always talk about in the book, I talk about some of the gifts of caregiving and the gifts of cancer, where nobody would ever think there are gifts there.
Right.
And some of my gifts were really getting to know my mom better as a vulnerable human being,
Mm.
because I always saw my mom as this superstar, this, warrior that was, fighting for people's rights and rooting for the underdog and teaching us to learn about, humanity and other people and stick up for people and
Yeah.
just very feisty. She was very intense. And I'm very fortunate that I actually inherited some of those qualities. And I've learned the difference between, being ashamed of, or embarrassed about my mom, when I was younger, and then actually
Yeah.
growing older with her. And especially through that experience of her becoming so vulnerable that
Hmm.
even though she wasn't used to asking for help, she had to learn to ask for help. And then
Yes.
because we knew her the best, my siblings and I,
Mhm.
uh, we were able to kind of translate and interpret. And, I remember one day, this is kind of a funny, but not funny. I just said, Mom, I'm not retired. You are. I have to work. And
Yeah.
so that I was always torn between wanting to, when she was feeling good, I wanted to go
Yeah.
out to lunch with her. I wanted to go shopping with her and stuff, even though I hate shopping. But I wanted to do those things with my mom that she really wanted to do. And
Hmm.
I'd say, I can't. I feel like a horrible daughter, but you know, I've got to work. And
Yeah.
there were other times when I would say to her, Mom, I need to sleep. Like your cancer is going to kill me. So
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kinds of things that you could say to your own mom that other people, if they knew that you said that. And I write about a lot of that stuff because I'm willing to write about things that not a lot of people want to even think about or talk about because I want to remove that stigma of
Yes.
shame and guilt and family dysfunction because all of those things come up when a loved one is in need.
Yes.
So, there are definitely gifts and there are joyful moments. And in the book, I write about some really kind of funny things too.
Yeah. Yeah. You really hit the nail on the head because you are pulled in so many different directions as a caregiver and as a human being. Um, and it is eye-opening to see your parent as a person because they are, until that moment, they are a parent, and you don't realize you've never seen them as a human being separate from you who's going through things. It's natural. It's not, I see it in my own kids, right? Like there are times where I actually say the words to them, you do realize I'm a person, right? And then I think and I go, wow, I don't know that I extended that same grace to my mom as much as, I could have or I should have or I would have. And it's something that you learn as you grow older. Um, and
Yes.
humanity kind of shows itself to you.
Yes. I'm actually feeling very fortunate that not that my mom got sick and died of cancer, but
Yeah.
that I was able to be available and with her a majority of the time. When she wasn't doing well, I would stay at her house. And, my sister and I, who I mentioned in the book, Nicole, we would take turns doing that. But Nicole had three little kids.
Mhm.
And I'm the only one of the five of us that didn't have kids. And so I was more available. Plus, I worked remotely.
Mhm.
So I could be, kind of just sitting around and, caring for her at her home. And I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful for what I do, for a living, for work, which is mostly remote work. Um, my company in Silicon Valley at the time didn't even know what was happening in my personal
Mhm.
life. I chose not to say anything because I didn't know, and they didn't know me really well, but the one guy that hired me knew me, and he knew that I was well, I'll just say it. I mean, I was a rock star in what I did, for
Yeah.
work. And so I wanted to keep that I wanted to keep that kind of perception going because I
Right.
think sometimes um if you confide in somebody that's the wrong person at work, that can do you in. And
Yeah.
so, and because I wasn't exactly sure of who I could trust,
Hmm.
I kept it to myself. And, they didn't know that I was, in waiting rooms and hospital rooms and, with my laptop and, pounding away and working.
Right.
Because truthfully, for those of us who are on that longer journey, there is downtime in
Mhm.
between. Then you just have to be on high alert because
Yes.
something could, come up and then you're needed and you might not be needed for more than a couple of minutes,
Hmm.
but you're needed. And so my mom was my priority and I'm very, very fortunate still to this day that I am able to make my loved ones a priority in that way. And the caregiving journey is forever. So
Yes.
I consider myself a family caregiver to this day. And, when the situation arises again, that I'll need to step up and be
Hmm.
more involved with someone else's personal life. It's not something that I look forward to. However, it's something that I will step up and do it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you said so many things that I want to talk about, and I have to decide what to start with. Um, when you are a caregiver, you never stop being a caregiver. And that is so true because I think you are quick to recognize that it will happen again. And you look for, what is the word I'm looking for? You look for the signs sooner than you did the first time because you got caught off guard the first time. I mean, and
Mhm.
not just you, I mean, everyone, the first time you're a caregiver, you're caught with your pants down. Like it is a flurry of activity and trying to figure out how to get your footing and how are you going to navigate this. And once you go through all of that, you know what you would do differently. You kind of have your routine down. Now, I will say with the caveat that it's kind of like having kids. Just because you had one and you figured that out does not mean that it's going to work the same for the second kid, because that second kid, I guarantee you, is going to be totally different and like all of the other things that your first kid didn't. So you have the fundamentals down, but you have to make a lot of adjustments.
Yes. Yes. And I call it like that deer in the headlights moment when
Yes.
there's an accident or there's a diagnosis or maybe your child is born, with a birth defect or something. And
Yeah.
then it's a lifelong caregiving journey.
Mhm.
And none of us, I talk to people about this all the time because, I'm in social situations and I'm doing events and stuff with my books locally. And,
Mhm.
I tell people that it really doesn't matter what the caregiving is for, whether it's for your kid or a parent or a loved one, that care is needed. And it's for us to figure out the extent to which, and the capacity that we
Mhm.
have to which we can, stand up and be there and step up for those loved ones. And it's a reason that we created systems and structures around my mom's diagnosis. So I
Mhm.
jokingly say, but it's true, you we've always been entrepreneurs in our family. I come from a long line of immigrants and entrepreneurs on both sides. And my mom was my first teacher about how to build a business and how to create systems and structures, which really is just a fancy way of saying list making or chart
Yes.
making. And so I offer a lot of that in the book for people to just copy and adapt to whatever their situation is.
Mhm.
And those are the things that are adaptable for any situation, no matter, excuse me, the caregiving circumstances or the cause, for the caregiving. And so
Yeah.
really like that there's more of an industry now in caregiving than there was in 2011.
Mhm.
There are more people that I'm meeting like you who have the Careful List and really are doing a great service because you know that at the time in 2011 when my mom was diagnosed, we felt completely abandoned and
There
alone.
was nothing.
And,
Yeah.
sadly, this medical system that exists in the United States is so, it just seems like it's getting worse. And I'm not saying that the people on the front lines and the human beings who are professionals and qualified aren't magnificent. I'm saying that that structure that we have, and I'm not going to go off on my whole rant, my activism rant about our healthcare system. Um, except to say that it's based on old, kind of patriarchal, oppressive, like you don't need to know what you don't need to know, what we think you don't need to know. And in our family, we need and want to know every single thing. So if you're not, coming out with the information, we're either going to make up our own stuff or we're going to go to somebody else that's going to inform us better. Like my
Yeah.
mom was so much about education. She was so focused on education. And she always said, that I can't even remember. Like, I probably wrote it in the book and I can't remember, but she was always preaching to us about getting more education. If you're struggling with something, or if you don't know something, or you're curious, then ask the questions. And so we created these systems and structures to help ourselves navigate the everyday kind of dry, boring stuff. But when you're asked 1,000 times the same question
Mm,
by the people in the emergency room or the front office staff who really doesn't know you, or they're changing shifts at the hospital, right?
mhm,
So you have a whole new staff coming in. Yes, you're right. Like in the first year, it was just, okay, we're flying by the seat of our pants. We got to figure this out. And
mhm.
by the end of the time, we really, I think we had a very good handle on, you know, what what this emergency entails,
Yep.
when to call 911, um, how to get our team involved. We, after a
Yeah.
while, we started to trust more people to help us care for my mom.
Hmm.
And so, as the firstborn of five children in a very strong family, I was that delegator. I was that person who kind of helped to organize. And then we had a binder in the hallway right before you walked into my mom's bedroom, and that binder had everything in it. It was like a job manual.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that is such a key. And there are tools out there that can help you figure out what to put in a binder like that. There's one that we list on my site called This Is My Care, which is it guides you through how to do that and what to include. But as you're saying all of these things, it brings me back to something that you had said earlier about not wanting your job to know that you were a caregiver. And that is such a common theme because you don't know how it's going to be received and or perceived, right? That, well, you're doing that and you're not doing your job. And you're emotional at work and you're not ready for this project, or we can't give you this responsibility. One of the things I would love to change is that perception because all of the things that you just talked about, the project management, the
yeah,
entrepreneurial aspect, the pulling together a team, and the leadership required. If someone is caregiving, they are more than qualified to run projects at work, to manage teams of people at work, to be leaders. And if they're doing that and working, that's unbelievable. But I want to speak specifically to people who are taking a caregiving gap in their resume. List all of the things that you do that translate to business, all of the financials, the bookkeeping, all of that stuff translates to having a job. And to employers, anybody who's listening who hires folks, recruiters, human resources, I cannot overstate the importance of the skill set that somebody who has been a caregiver brings to the workplace, in
mhm,
addition to the compassion and the empathy that they will have for their fellow coworkers, because you don't come out of caregiving as an uncompassionate person.
exactly right. And I refer to this a lot, that journey with my mom was a transformational leadership journey.
Yes.
And I learned so much about what I could do better, and
Hmm.
especially for myself, because truthfully, at the time that I was caring for my mom, and ironically, I was not caring for myself,
Yep.
which is also very common with us family caregivers. And that's why I'm so glad that I met you and some of the other family caregivers that we've met in our circles,
Mhm.
because it is becoming an industry now, which I'm so grateful for, that it's not such a hush hush thing, and
Yes.
There are even software apps now that can help
Mhm.
people. So, I mean, we had our checklists and we had our binders and we had our tracking sheets, and we would be able to present all of this to the doctors. I had Caring Bridge, which was just a lifesaver in
Yes.
terms of communicating with the family and friends all over the world. And without these tools, I think that we fail ourselves and we fail our loved ones. So it's really important
Yes.
to tap into those.
Absolutely. Um, One of the things that has been so encouraging to me, and you're talking about the industry that's developing around caregiving, are the people who have gone through it and have said, I don't want this for others. I don't want this for my friends. I don't want this for my kids. I don't want this for my nieces and nephews. This has to get better, and we have to fix this problem. Um, so if you are listening to this podcast and you are in the thick of it, or you are at the beginning of the road, um, there are people who want it to be better for you. And if you are nearing the end of your caregiving journey, share what you know, share what you've learned. The more that we talk about this and share our knowledge, share our experiences, what works, what doesn't work, that's how we start to fix broken systems. And that's how we support one another. Um, Silence is not the way to go.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I talk about this all the time. I talk about this in my personal life and in my business as a global community builder, is that our voices are needed.
Mm,
And when I was younger, I wanted everybody to like me and I wanted to please everyone. And in the caregiving realm, my mother worshiped doctors,
mm.
and she did not look at them as human beings. She looked at them as gods, and almost like
Superheroes.
her, yeah, like her boss, right? Like,
Yes.
tell me what to do. And we know that's a generational thing.
Yeah.
And I have so much compassion and empathy for the medical profession, the frontline workers, the healers, the practitioners. We went Eastern, Western, every which way to find different things to help my mom move through that cancer journey and
Yeah.
feel the best that she could possibly feel,
Mm,
given whatever the circumstances were. And so, yes, with the way that our world is today and the way that our health system, it just seems like it's getting worse. I think it's important also to shore up those professionals, those doctors, find those doctors who we found a primary care physician who is very interested in nutrition. You know, I'm hoping that, even the training that certain doctors are getting is more and more and more grounded in holistic
mm.
healing. Because I think we need it all, right?
Yes.
My mom had chemo, my mom had surgery that really, I believe, just lengthened her life, and not in the worst ways. In between, she was able to feel good enough to travel, to
Mm,
go to a family wedding in another country or to go back to Michigan and visit family members for, whatever occasions.
yeah.
And I think that it's not all or nothing, all or nothing. It's not black and white. It's for us to be, my big word is discernment.
Yes.
So for us to be more discerning, for us to be more curious, I'm not here having all of the answers. In fact, my book is not all of the answers. My book is a conversation starter.
Yes.
Um, my story is an empowerment and encouragement for other family caregivers that I know the right people are going to get in their hands, and maybe my checklists and my tracking charts can help them, and they
Mm,
can create their own binders out of it and be a little bit more organized, because when we're going through the emotional roller coaster.
Mhm.
Um, we don't always think as clearly, as we want to. So that's
Oh,
why
absolutely.
these systems and structures are very, very helpful and necessary.
Yes. Yes. And if you have multiple caregivers, having that same source of truth that everyone is using so that if someone different takes the loved one to a doctor's appointment, they're giving the same information that they would get no matter who takes them to that appointment. Um, and like you said, there are apps. So if some folks, I like to write things down because it helps me remember. But from a convenience standpoint, or if there are multiple caregivers and you don't all live close to one another, an app would be much more helpful or appropriate. There's one called Inner Hive
Yeah.
that is really, really good. And there's another one that is launching in March, I think, called Dovetail. Um, so we're at Carefulist. We are tracking all of those and we'll be making them available as they're launching. But Inner Hive is already out there for anybody who's looking.
That's awesome.
So one of the things that you talked about when you were writing your story about your mom was reflecting on your entries with Caring Bridge. And I'm just thinking about the writing process in general. How was that helpful for you? Did the process align your thoughts? Did it help you to actually process what happened? What's your story there?
So that's a great question. When I was writing the journal entries and being in the heat of it, like in the trenches, it was really important for me to figure out what my approach and my strategy was going to be. It's just like a business, right? And so I was thinking about my audience and who am
Mhm.
I speaking to? And I'm speaking to people who are related to us in some way, and even if they're friends or close friends, they love my mom, they love her kids, and
Mhm.
they all they want to do is know what's going on and support us at every step of the way. And so those journal entries were specifically about my mom. They weren't, I didn't allow myself to get into my emotions like, oh my God, what am I going to do without my mom? That was the whole first year was me be thinking, what am I going to do without my mom? It was all about me. And
Yeah.
yet, and yet, when I showed up in that Caring Bridge journal, I showed
Mhm.
up as a reporter. I showed up
Yes.
not exactly objective because I felt so, um, and we all did, my mom, especially, she felt so great that people cared enough to even read my journal entries and then they commented on them. And so
Yes.
people were commenting on them and they were saying, man, like we thought we were going to have to console you, but you're making us laugh.
Hmm.
And so I was just finding the humor in my
Yep.
mom's these silly situations that we were in that were completely foreign to us.
Right.
And yet I was able to find the humor. And so these family members kept encouraging me to actually write the book.
Hmm.
And so those journal entries were completely different from a different perspective, speaking to a different listening audience
Yeah.
than what I wrote in the book after the journal entry. And that was all about me. That was all
Yeah.
about, um, how I felt like I did a crappy job taking care of myself. I put on a bunch of weight and I lived on, slushy, sugary drinks. And,
Mhm.
my sugar addiction was in high gear during that
Yeah.
time.
That's so
And
common.
there was like, there was all this nutrition for my mom
Hmm.
because we had a family member cooking and bringing meals over.
Hmm.
I was I was having sugar as my crutch. And so
Yeah.
very often I didn't even eat that healthy food, the nutritious food that was being brought in from my mom. And, so I learned about that difference between, you know, the audience that you're speaking to when you're writing the journal entry and then writing my book and reliving those experiences. And I guess because I'm very intuitive and I'm somewhat of an empath,
Mhm.
I can even like I can go in my own heart, in my own body and my head and kind of tap into, yeah, what was that? Like, what did that bring up? And writing the
Mhm.
book, yes, I mean, it, I won't say it was easy, but it seemed like it just flowed out of me.
Yeah.
And I work with a coach. I have an intuitive life coach, and she's
Mhm.
amazing. And she really helps me tap into that flow. And,
Mhm.
what do I have to say that's healing for me, as well as giving other people permission to use their own voices or to feel their
Mhm.
own feelings and whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I really knew that I was going to write about things as
Mhm.
honestly as I could without hurting anyone, right?
Right.
Um, Especially when you have a big family and there's dysfunction there. I wrote
Mhm.
as quickly as I could to let other people know I see you, I hear you, I feel you. You know,
Yeah.
I may not be going through,
Nobody does it perfectly.
right.
It doesn't, perfection does not exist anywhere, but especially in caregiving, especially among families trying to navigate caregiving.
Yeah, like
So if you
nobody,
think everybody does it without arguing or having spats, you're wrong.
right. Like nobody really knows what they're doing. And my philosophy and my belief is that everybody's doing the best they can at the time with
Yeah.
what they have in front of them. And so the words that I wrote, both in the journal while my mom was alive and in my book after she died, have been very healing for me, whether it's
Mhm.
bringing up sorrow or whether it's bringing up joy. And there are tears on both sides. There's always
Yeah.
tears, which
Yes.
I welcome the tears, and especially when certain memories are triggered.
Hmm.
And I just, I think it's really important to get it out of us, get our stories. I'm a big proponent for storytelling. Um,
Yes.
this is, it's part of what I teach and consult on in my business is for
Hmm.
brands, for storytelling and
Hmm.
to tell the truth and to tell the truth without gushing blood all over other people.
Yeah.
And, we may be hurt, we may be traumatized, we may feel injured, and we may feel also like we need to carry other people's weight.
Hmm.
And literally, that's what I did. And that was 60 pounds ago. So that was, you'll see pictures in my book. I look a lot different than I look now because that was 60 pounds ago.
Yeah.
And my mantra, even then, was this is not mine to carry. This is
Hmm.
not mine to carry. And the more I've been able to internalize that mantra, and yes, through the help I've been getting, like through my coach and all of the reading and the research and the people like you that I meet and that I really tap into resources,
Hmm.
the more I know that this is important for us to express that, express what we're feeling, and ask the
Yes.
question, get more curious.
Yes. And I'm also a writer. So for me to process, I have a group on Facebook that is just my close friends and family, and I would post, sometimes they were updates, but often it was my way of processing what was going on. And um, it was really challenging for me, especially in the beginning of my mom's dementia journey, because my kids were so little. And knowing that there were things they could understand and things they couldn't understand, and having to try to explain things in a way that they would understand enough. Like, you have to be patient with Gaga. She doesn't know how to, things like that. Um, but the great thing about doing it the way I did it on Facebook was that those posts now come up in my memories and I
Oh,
see them. So on that day, on this day, 9 years ago, this happened, or, this is what I thought, or whatever. And it was really cathartic for me to be able to just get that out in the open. And what I've found is, yes, I was a lot younger than a lot of people who are dealing with a dementia situation. But now, 10, 15 years later, I have friends and family who are starting to go down that journey themselves. And they remember seeing my posts and they reach out and they say, I think we may be going down this road. What do you think? And I've had a lot of conversations that way. Um, so if you are comfortable sharing the way you feel and the way things are unfolding for you, just know that you are paving the way for those who come after you to reach out for help and to talk with you about it. And if you're not a writer, you don't have to share your thoughts in that way with people. Maybe you make playlists of songs that appeal to you and you share, and you're like, hey, this is the way I'm feeling right now. I created this playlist. Listen to these songs. And it's not really talking about you, but people get a general idea of how you're feeling. Maybe you're artistic and you like to draw or create a collage or whatever, but however you express yourself, make time to express yourself and don't keep it bottled up, because that is when, there are statistics and they're escaping me right now of caregivers becoming the patient
Mm,
while they're taking care of someone else
mhm,
because the stress is so high,
mhm,
because they're not taking care of themselves, because it's so difficult to take care of yourself when you're
mhm,
so focused on the health of someone else.
mhm,
Um, and so, any lifeline you can establish for yourself, that is the key. That is the thing you need to do. So, if it's something as simple as getting Lynn's book and reading it as a conversation starter with your friends and your family,
mhm.
then you should do that.
Thank you. Yes, I believe just from, all of the reviews and the people I've had conversations with that it definitely has helped other people. I ended up pre-diabetic
Mhm.
to talk about, the caregiver becoming the patient. And so I really had to figure out my nutrition, my movement, how was I going to, spend the next however many years I have left on the planet.
Yeah.
And I think it's a love story for our loved ones and us. And it's also a love story of getting to know ourselves and loving ourselves into
Yes.
better health. My mom always said health is wealth.
Mhm.
And it's so, so true. And again, there are plenty of resources now. And if anybody's curious, you can hit me up because I have a functional nutritionist, I have my coach, I have my movement teachers, and these things are all non-negotiable for me today. And yes, I think I would be better prepared the next time I'm called to be hands-on family caregiver. I
Mhm.
like to think, that I would be, and I have figured out ways to have more nutrition and have more movement. And these are things I've been learning from, the people that I've been hiring and paying to coach me and consult with me and to teach me these things. And there's a quote in my book and even on the bookmark that I give out by Ram Dass, and it says, "We are all just walking each other home."
Yes.
And I feel so strongly that we do need each other. I mean, we need to put the unity back in community. And that right now people are feeling super disconnected, super confused. There's chaos. There's all kinds of stuff going on externally, just swirling all around us.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I have figured out some shortcuts to get my central nervous system back to me.
Yeah.
And one of them is that I reach out to my community and
Yeah.
I talk about stuff, stuff that maybe I wouldn't have talked about before because I would have been afraid of somebody judging me in a certain way. And, I think age is a wonderful thing too, because I don't care as much what people think of me
Right.
as I do.
Yeah. I mean, there are many gifts in caregiving. Um, and certainly one of them is just the natural process of aging and getting to a point like, I hit my 40s several years ago now. And with each passing year, I care less about the opinions of others. And it's so freeing and wonderful.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier to prioritize yourself because that noise and the judgment falls away. And you start to realize none of those people are here to take care of me.
Mhm.
I am here to take care of me for as long as I am able. And so you need to do what you need to do to make that happen.
Mhm.
Um, I know you have recently launched a second book.
Yeah.
And I think it probably lends itself quite well to where we're headed in this conversation. So it's called Voices of the 21st Century. Um,
Women
talk to
empowered through
me.
passion and purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't this a beautiful cover too?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's another international bestseller. So I contributed a chapter to this. And when I saw Voices of the 21st Century, Women Empowered Through Passion and Purpose, because I work with a coach and because I've identified my values and my own identity and my own purpose, I felt like it was the right time for me to contribute a chapter to this book. And my chapter is called You Are Worthy of Love. And I wrote about a time in my past life that I didn't feel that I was worthy of love.
Hmm.
And I really wrote it on purpose in a very kind of raw way, where I know because of the reviews and because of the feedback that I get, that women are encouraged by other women to love themselves more, become more resilient, and to tap into those community resources that they're there. It's just sometimes when we're in it, we don't see it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, for sure.
I believe that I exist, that I'm on this planet to help people see what they're too close to see, what's right in front of their
Yes.
faces, but they still can't see it. And so for my business clients, I'm like the voice of the consumer, right? I'm like that person who come in and assess the business holistically and say, here's what I recommend first, second, third. Again, going back to the systems, the checklists, the tracking charts. And the same thing for family caregivers is identifying those standards, just like you would in a business,
Mm.
those standards and those non-negotiables that are going to make it so much easier for you to at least maybe not flow completely through your days, but at
Mhm.
least not be as surprised or shocked or blindsided by the unknown or what's just cropping up, right? Because there's
Mhm.
always going to be that. There's always
Yes.
going to be chaos. Let the chaos happen as long as we have these standards and that we know our own purpose and our own identity enough to
Mm.
recognize what's ours to carry and what is not ours to carry.
Yeah.
What's for us and what's not for us? What can we leave? What can we not get involved with? What conversation can we back away from and just
Mm.
let that be, over there where it
Right.
is? So, yeah, thank you. I love this new book, and it's a very easy read. It's written by women from all over the world, so it's got very diverse perspectives on lots of different things. And I'm going to do another book kind of in the same way. I'm going to interview people who don't necessarily like to write or want to write, but they have a story to tell.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to do interviews, and I'm just starting up that process actually this week of inviting people to apply to do that and to get
Oh,
involved in
cool.
the project with me. Yeah. So we'll
Oh,
see
that's
how
super
it goes.
exciting.
It's all a big experiment, and
Yeah.
it's a kind of a spin-off from this book, Out of
Mhm.
Love, because it has to do with matriarchy
Mm,
and matriarchy today. As a study compared to matriarchy when we were little and
yeah.
how we viewed it. So more to
Oh,
come
interesting. Oh, well, we will look forward to that for sure.
to.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about your caregiving experience or about what you've learned through this journey?
I have learned to ask for help, and my mom was not a great model for that because, my mom was a single independent woman. She and my dad split up when I was 15, and she never remarried, and she wanted to do everything herself and take care of everybody else besides herself. And
Right.
so she had some beautiful qualities that didn't necessarily lend themselves to her self-care and her nervous
Mhm.
system. And so I kind of watched my mom and said, you know, we need to start asking for help. And my mom did learn before the end of her life, she did learn to speak up and to ask for help. She had
Yeah.
to. She had no other choice. So I think I would like to believe that I'm learning lessons before I'm forced into learning those lessons.
Yes.
Um, like you said this in a different way earlier. It's like you have this radar and you learn to be more in tune. And again,
Mhm.
my favorite word this year, more discerning
Yes.
about what you need to be involved with and what you don't need to be involved with, and how much information you need and how much information really isn't critical at that point. And
Mhm.
so this is all part of this leadership journey that we talked about. And it is transformational because I feel like although I'm the same person that I always was, I'm still very, very different in terms of how I approach my life and my relationships than I did,
Absolutely.
even 10 years ago, or
Yes.
14 years ago when my mom was diagnosed. So I'm very appreciative of these conversations and of the community that we're building and
Yes.
of the new connections that we're creating on and offline. And I
Yes.
love to do public appearances like for speaking. I love to share and get, people involved in conversations about caregiving and about just life in general
Yeah.
and doing the best we can with what we have in front of us at the time, and also bringing those people into our teams to help us see what we are too close to see. So that
Yes.
connection and that community really has been making a difference for me, and I know it's going to make a difference for our world going forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this information and insight with us today. If people are interested in contacting you for speaking engagements or a signed copy of your book, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes, please reach out to me on my website. It's myname.com, lynnabatejohnson.com. And I'm offering both of my books on my website and I'm signing them. This one you can't get because it's a collaborative book. You can't get on Amazon anyway,
Mm,
at least not the copy that has my name on it. Um,
okay.
but I'm writing about such personal stuff. And
Yeah.
so especially for the people in the United States, I can ship anywhere in the United States and I can actually write your name on it. Or if you're gifting it to someone, I get to have that energy exchange with the people who are interested in reading my stories.
Yeah.
And I get to sign it and send it out with a little gift. And, it's just more intimate. All of this is really, I consider them intimate conversations that we are now bringing out to the world in a way that's
Yes.
going to have a ripple effect and help more people, especially when we use social media channels properly. And I think
Mhm.
that's those exist is for us to be able to share these messages
Yes,
farther and faster, right? With those ripple effects.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you again for being with us today. You can follow Carefulist on all of our social channels and resources at our website, carefulist.com, where you can find Lynn's books. And I will look forward to seeing everyone on our next episode. Until then, take care.